Welcome back to the show. Today's episode is a deep dive into Mel Kiper Jr.'s latest 2026 NFL Draft Big Board, and more specifically, what it could mean for the Dallas Cowboys moving forward. We're not just listing names today. We're breaking down talent, trends, positional value, and how these prospects might shape the future of teams like Dallas. This is about projection, development, and understanding how the modern NFL is evolving. Mel Kiper's board always sparks debate, and this year is no different. What immediately stands out is the heavy emphasis on quarterback play at the very top. That tells us something important right away. The 2026 class is shaping up to be defined by leadership, decision-making, and offensive control. In today's NFL, that's the currency teams are willing to pay top dollar for. Let's start at number 1. Fernando Mendoza, quarterback out of Indiana. Mendoza being ranked first overall may surprise casual fans, but when you turn on the tape, the logic becomes clear. He's calm in the pocket, processes defenses quickly, and doesn't panic under pressure. His mechanics are clean, and while he may not be the flashiest quarterback athletically, his football IQ and accuracy give him a very high floor. In a league where mistakes at quarterback can cost coaches their jobs, Mendoza represents stability. For teams looking to reset their franchise, that matters more than highlight throws. Right behind him is Dante Moore from Oregon, another quarterback but a very different style. Moore brings more natural arm talent and creativity. He can extend plays, attack downfield, and thrive in modern spread concepts. However, his game is still being refined. Decision-making consistency will be the key factor that determines whether he challenges Mendoza for QB1 status by draft time. From a Cowboys perspective, even if quarterback is an immediate need, this kind of talent always forces front offices to evaluate long-term options. And number 3, we see the first non-quarterback, Jeremiah Love, running back from Notre Dame. Running backs rarely crack the top 5 anymore, which tells you just how special Love is viewed. He combines vision, burst, and balance in a way that translates cleanly to the NFL. He's not just a runner. He's a complete offensive weapon. In Dallas, where offensive balance has historically been crucial, a player like Love would immediately raise questions about how teams value elite running backs in a modern game. Moving to number 4, Arvell Reese, linebacker from Ohio State, represents the continued importance of defensive versatility. Reese is not just a traditional linebacker. He's a space defender, a communicator, and a tone setter. He can cover tight ends, shoot gaps, and quarterback the defense. For teams like the Cowboys, who have invested heavily in defensive speed and flexibility, Reese fits the profile of what modern defenses demand. At number 5, Francis Mauigoa, offensive tackle from Miami, reminds us that the trenches still matter. Quarterbacks can't operate without protection, and Mauigoa brings size, footwork, and power. He's the kind of tackle who can start early in his career and anchor an offensive line for a decade. Dallas has always valued strong offensive line play, and prospects like Mauigoa will always be on their radar. Number 6 is David Bailey, edge rusher from Texas Tech. Bailey's ranking reflects the NFL's obsession with pass rushers, and for good reason. He's explosive off the line, relentless, and disruptive even when he doesn't record a sack. Edge defenders who can consistently pressure quarterbacks are among the most valuable assets in football, and Bailey fits that mold perfectly. Rounding out the top 7 is Caleb Downs, safety from Ohio State. Downs being this high shows how much the safety position has evolved. He's not just a deep defender. He can play in the box, cover receivers, and disguise coverages. For a Cowboys defense that values interchangeable pieces in the secondary, Downs will be a chess piece with endless possibilities. Now let's shift specifically to other 2026 prospects linked to the Dallas Cowboys. C.J. Allen, inside linebacker from Georgia, ranked as ILB3, is another example of SEC defensive excellence. He's physical, disciplined, and battle-tested. Georgia defenders often enter the NFL more prepared than most, and Allen's instincts make him a reliable option in the middle of a defense. T.J. Parker, edge linebacker from Clemson, ranked OLB2, brings speed and length. Clemson has a history of producing NFL-ready defenders, and Parker fits that tradition. His ability to rush the passer and drop into coverage makes him especially appealing in hybrid defensive schemes. Cassius Howell from Texas A&M, ranked OLB3, is a high-upside prospect. He's raw in some areas, but the athletic traits are undeniable. For a team like Dallas that has shown confidence in developing defensive talent, Howell could be a long-term investment. In the secondary, Avion Terrell, cornerback from Clemson, ranked CB3, stands out for his technique and competitiveness. He's comfortable in man coverage and doesn't shy away from physical matchups. Cornerbacks who can hold up one-on-one are extremely valuable, especially in playoff football. Finally, Brandon Cisse, cornerback from South Carolina, ranked CB4, rounds out the group. Cisse is a player who continues to rise as evaluators look deeper into his tape. He's fluid, intelligent, and improving every season. Players like this often outperform their draft position. When you look at Mel Kiper's board as a whole, a clear pattern emerges. Versatility, intelligence, and positional value are driving evaluations. This isn't just about raw athleticism anymore. It's about how players fit into complex systems and how quickly they can contribute. For the Dallas Cowboys, the 2026 draft class presents opportunity. Whether it's reinforcing the defense, preparing for long-term offensive transitions, or simply adding elite talent, this board gives us a preview of the decisions that will define the next era of the franchise. And that's what makes draft analysis so fascinating. It's not just about predicting picks. It's about understanding the future of the game itself. Welcome back to the show. And today we're diving deep into one of the most important conversations surrounding the Dallas Cowboys as they move into the offseason, a conversation that sits right at the intersection of ambition, timing, roster construction, and the reality of the NFL business, because the Cowboys made it very clear at the trade deadline this past season that they were not content to sit on their hands. They wanted to make a move. They wanted to push chips toward the center of the table. And they did exactly that by trading for Quinnen Williams from the New York Jets, a bold move that sent a message to the rest of the league that Dallas believes its championship window is open right now. But as aggressive as that move was, it also opened the door to even bigger speculation, because all season long there were persistent rumors that the Cowboys were monitoring the situation in Las Vegas with Max Crosby, one of the most dominant defensive ends in football, a player who embodies intensity, production, and leadership. And when Crosby's season ended with visible frustration and reported tension between himself and the Raiders organization, those rumors didn't die down, they exploded, and suddenly the question wasn't if Dallas would make another move, but how far they should be willing to go. And that brings us to the heart of today's discussion. Because while fans dream about pairing Micah Parsons with Max Crosby and creating the most terrifying pass rushing duo in the NFL, not everyone inside the Cowboys media ecosystem believes that's the smartest path forward, including two well-known voices on Dallas Sports Radio, Sean Sharif and RJ Choppy from 105.3 The Fan, who recently had a fascinating conversation about what the Cowboys actually need a defensive end, and more importantly, how they should go about getting it. And their take might surprise some people, because while they fully acknowledge that Max Crosby is an elite, game-changing player, they both argued that if you zoom out and look at the full picture, the better move for Dallas would be to pursue Trey Hendrickson instead, and that difference in approach says a lot about how this team should be thinking about its future, because the core issue isn't talent, it's cost. And in the NFL, cost isn't just measured in dollars. It's measured in draft picks, flexibility, and time. And Sean Sharif made it very clear where he stands when he said flat out that he is not willing to trade what it would take to get Max Crosby to Dallas, emphasizing that instead of mortgaging the future, the Cowboys should simply go out and sign Trey Hendrickson in free agency without giving up a single draft pick, and that point alone is worth unpacking slowly, because Max Crosby would almost certainly require at least one first-round pick, possibly more, along with a massive contract extension, whereas Hendrickson, as a free agent, would only cost money, and money, while significant, doesn't strip your roster-building tools the way lost draft capital does. And RJ Choppy echoed that sentiment, pointing out that people may have forgotten that Hendrickson is simply available, sitting there on the open market, and that Dallas could realistically offer him a 2- or 3-year deal, get high-end pass rush production immediately, and still walk into the draft with both of their first-round picks intact, which is a massive advantage when you're trying to sustain competitiveness. And yes, Choppy admitted that Hendrickson is not as good as Crosby in a vacuum. And yes, he acknowledged that Hendrickson is coming off an injury. But he also made it very clear that under no circumstances would he sacrifice first-round draft capital for Crosby, especially given where this team is right now. And that leads us into the age conversation, because one of the immediate counterarguments to signing Trey Hendrickson is that he's 31 years old. And in NFL terms, that's not young, especially for an edge rusher who relies on explosiveness and power. But Sean and RJ dismissed the concern rather quickly, and the reason they did is actually very telling about how they view the Cowboys championship window. Because when you look at the roster honestly, you see that Dak Prescott is also in his 30s, and while he's still playing at a high level, the reality is that quarterbacks don't get younger, contracts get bigger, and injury risk increases every year. And in their view, and frankly in the view of many around the league, the Cowboys' true Super Bowl window is probably the next 2 seasons, not 5, not 7, but 2, maybe 3 at most. And when your window is that tight, your priorities shift from long-term upside to immediate impact. And that's where Trey Hendrickson becomes extremely appealing, because when healthy, he has proven beyond any doubt that he can be one of the most productive pass rushers in football. And despite missing time this season due to a hip injury that landed him on injured reserve after 7 games, Hendrickson still recorded 4 sacks before going down. And while that stat line might not jump off the page at first glance, the context matters, because injuries have a way of suppressing market value. And that could actually work in Dallas' favor, potentially allowing them to sign a premier edge rusher at a slightly reduced price, essentially rolling the dice on health in exchange for elite upside. And if we zoom out and look at Hendrickson's body of work, the case becomes even stronger, because when he was fully healthy in 2024, he led the entire NFL in sacks with 17.5, and that wasn't a fluke or a one-year spike, because he posted the exact same number, 17.5 sacks, in 2023 as well, meaning that over the last 2 fully healthy seasons, he was arguably the most productive pass rusher in the league. And over 5 seasons with the Cincinnati Bengals, he's totaled 61 sacks, a number that puts him firmly in elite company. And when you imagine that level of production lining up opposite Micah Parsons, it's not hard to see why Sean and RJ believe this could be the smarter, cleaner, more efficient move, because you're not just adding sacks, you're changing protections, forcing offenses to pick their poison, and creating more one-on-one opportunities across the defensive front. And all of this circles back to the broader philosophy question facing the Cowboys this offseason, which is whether they want to go all in the most dramatic way possible by swinging a blockbuster trade for a superstar like Max Crosby, or whether they want to take a slightly more disciplined approach, leveraging free agency to address their biggest needs while preserving draft capital to keep the roster deep and flexible. And there's no denying that Crosby would be electric in Dallas. There's no denying that his motor, leadership, and production would elevate the defense instantly. But there's also no denying that the price would be enormous. And when you consider the age of the core players, the limited championship window, and the importance of maintaining first-round picks to inject young talent into the roster, the argument for Trey Hendrickson becomes not just reasonable, but compelling, because championships are rarely won by winning headlines in March. They're won by building balanced rosters that peak at the right time. And if the Cowboys believe their time is now, then adding a proven elite pass rusher without sacrificing future assets might be the exact kind of calculated risk that pushes them over the top. And as this offseason unfolds, all eyes will be on Dallas. The Dallas Cowboys are officially at one of the most important crossroads they've faced in years. And it isn't about a quarterback, a draft pick, or a blockbuster trade. It's about leadership, philosophy, and whether this franchise truly understands how deep the defensive hole has become. The search for a new defensive coordinator is now fully underway, and the names coming through the doors of the Star tell a very clear story. Dallas knows it cannot afford to get this hire wrong. Over the past few days, the Cowboys have already conducted 3 interviews, speaking with Minnesota Vikings defensive pass game coordinator Durant Jones, Cleveland Browns safeties coach Ephraim Bonda, and Denver Broncos defensive pass game coordinator Jim Leonhard. On the surface, those names may not jump off the page to casual fans, but they reflect a deliberate shift in thinking. These are not legacy hires. These are not splashy, brand-name coordinators being brought in for optics. These are teachers, schemers, and developers. Coaches who have worked in modern defensive systems and have been tasked with solving passing games in an era where stopping the pass is the entire ballgame. At the same time, the Cowboys did attempt to swing higher. They requested permission to interview Atlanta Falcons defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich, a respected defensive mind with head coaching experience and a reputation for physical, disciplined football. That request was denied. Atlanta, now searching for a new head coach after firing Raheem Morris, another potential Cowboys candidate, chose to keep Ulbrich in-house. That denial matters because it highlights the competition Dallas is facing. Good defensive coaches are not sitting around unemployed. They are either being promoted, protected, or aggressively pursued elsewhere. And that brings us to the name hovering over this entire process, Brian Flores. Flores is the type of candidate who changes the temperature of a room the moment he becomes available. He is currently the defensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings, and his work there has been nothing short of remarkable. In a league that is increasingly built around spacing, tempo, and quarterback comfort, Flores has consistently found ways to disrupt timing, confuse protections, and manufacture pressure without elite personnel. His defenses are aggressive, unpredictable, and unapologetically attacking. This week is critical because Flores is now free to interview for defensive coordinator positions after completing head coaching interviews last week. That distinction matters. Flores is not looking for just any job. He is looking for the right job. And more importantly, he is likely looking for a promotion, not a lateral move. If a head coaching opportunity materializes, that will almost certainly be his priority. But if it doesn't, Dallas becomes one of the most fascinating options on the table. A high-profile franchise with immense pressure, significant resources, and a defense that is desperate for structural repair. According to Calvin Watkins of the Dallas Morning News, the Cowboys are far from finished with their search. After completing interviews with Jones, Bonda, and Leonhard, the organization plans to bring in additional candidates next week. Jim Leonhard, who spoke with the team on Saturday, was the final interview of the initial group, but not the final interview overall. This is not a rushed process. This is a franchise that understands the magnitude of the decision in front of it. And that magnitude becomes painfully clear when you look at the numbers. The 2025 Dallas Cowboys defense was not just bad, it was historically bad. They ranked 30th in the NFL in total defense, allowing 377 yards per game. That alone would be concerning, but the deeper you dig, the worse it gets. Dallas surrendered a league-high 60 total touchdowns. 60. That is not a schematic hiccup. That is a systemic failure. Against the pass, the Cowboys were dead last in the league. 32nd. They allowed 251.5 passing yards per game and 35 passing touchdowns, the second most in the NFL, trailing only the New York Jets. And here's the detail that makes it even more alarming. The Jets failed to record a single interception in 2025. Dallas, meanwhile, was not far behind in terms of ball production. This was a defense that couldn't cover, couldn't disguise, and couldn't take the football away. That context matters when evaluating these coaching candidates. Whoever takes over this defense is not inheriting a playoff-caliber unit that needs a few tweaks. They're inheriting a broken structure. The previous scheme failed to protect the secondary, failed to generate consistent pressure, and failed to adjust when offenses inevitably attacked the same weaknesses week after week. This next defensive coordinator will be tasked with rebuilding the Cowboys' defensive identity from the ground up. That's why the backgrounds of these candidates are so important. Deron Jones has experience coordinating the defensive pass game in Minnesota, working under Brian Flores, and helping implement one of the most aggressive pressure packages in the league. Ephraim Bonda has been deeply involved in Cleveland's secondary, a unit that has consistently played with discipline, physicality, and awareness. Jim Leonhard, a former elite safety himself, has built a reputation as one of the smartest defensive minds in football, particularly when it comes to coverage, disguise, and communication on the back end. But Flores remains the standard bearer. If Dallas can land Brian Flores, it would signal a genuine commitment to fixing what's broken. Flores does not run passive defenses. He does not sit back and hope his corners hold up. He attacks protections, forces quarterbacks to identify pressure pre-snap, and lives with the risk that comes with aggression. For a Cowboys defense that spent all of 2025 on its heels, that philosophical shift alone would be transformative. Of course, the challenge is convincing Flores that Dallas is the right place. This is a franchise with immense expectations, constant scrutiny, and an ownership structure that is deeply involved in football decisions. Not every coach wants that environment. Flores, in particular, values autonomy and trust. If Dallas is serious about him, the pitch cannot just be about brand or resources. It has to be about alignment, about allowing him to install his system, pick his staff, and build a defense that reflects his vision. And whoever gets the job will need help. Scheme alone will not fix this defense. Personnel matters. That's why the Cowboys' position in the 2026 NFL Draft is so crucial. With 2 top 20 picks, Dallas has a chance to give its next defensive coordinator the tools he needs. An edge rusher who can win one-on-one, linebackers who can actually run and tackle, and defensive backs who understand leverage and spacing. Coaching and talent must grow together. One without the other will fail. This hire is about more than replacing a coordinator. It's about deciding what the Cowboys want to be defensively in the next era. Do they want to be aggressive or reactive? Multiple or static? Do they want to dictate terms to offenses or spend another season hoping mistakes bail them out? The numbers from 2025 suggest hope is not a strategy. So as this search continues, every interview matters. Every conversation matters. Because the next defensive coordinator in Dallas will not just be calling plays. He will be tasked with restoring credibility to a defense that lost it entirely. Cowboys suddenly walk into the 2026 NFL Draft holding 2 top 20 selections. For a team staring down a full defensive reset in the aftermath of trading Micah Parsons, that is nothing short of massive. This is not a Cowboys roster that can afford to draft passively. The 2025 season exposed structural flaws across the defense, from the lack of consistent edge pressure to shaky linebacker play, to a secondary that simply could not hold up over 4 quarters. Parsons wasn't just an elite pass rusher. He was the identity of the defense. He was the piece offenses feared, the player coordinators built entire game plans around. Once he was gone, the Cowboys were left with a defense that reacted instead of dictated. That reality is what makes this draft and these 2 first-round picks so critical. 2 top 20 picks give you options. You can chase elite talent, or you can weaponize flexibility. But here's the complication. Dallas does not own its original 2nd or 3rd-round picks in 2026. That means if they stay put and simply make 2 first-round selections, they will have ability and toughness to a unit that needed both. But as the season unfolded, those hopes faded. The Cowboys' defense struggled in nearly every measurable category. Missed tackles, blown coverages, poor 3rd-down efficiency, and an inability to stop the run became weekly storylines. Opposing offenses seemed to find success far too easily, and the defense failed to complement an offense that often did enough to win games. Even after the mid-season trade for Quinnen Williams, which briefly sparked optimism, the improvement was short-lived. The defense showed flashes, but flashes are not enough in the NFL. Consistency wins games, and Dallas simply did not have it. In the end, Eberflus became the most visible symbol of the defense's failures. Letting him go was less about blame and more about reset. The Cowboys needed a fresh start. Coaching changes and what they reveal about Dallas' strategy. Coaching changes are rarely isolated decisions. They usually reflect a broader organizational philosophy. In this case, the Cowboys' decision to move on from Eberflus suggests that the front office is prioritizing immediate improvement over long-term patience. Dallas is not rebuilding. This is a team that believes it can compete now. With veteran stars, a proven quarterback, and playoff expectations, the margin for error is slim. That reality makes every coaching hire, every roster move, and every contract negotiation critically important. The next defensive coordinator will need to deliver results quickly. There will be no long adjustment period. The Cowboys are in win-now mode, whether they admit it publicly or not. The other major question, the future of Javonte Williams. While coaching changes grab headlines, roster decisions often have a bigger impact on the field. One of the most important questions Dallas faces this offseason is whether they can retain running back Javonte Williams. Williams just completed the best season of his career. He was explosive, reliable, and productive. More importantly, he became a central part of the Cowboys' offensive identity. When Dallas needed tough yards, big plays, or a spark, Williams delivered. That kind of performance does not come cheap. And now, the Cowboys face a familiar problem: how to keep a rising star without breaking the bank. Javonte Williams' breakout season in context. To understand why Williams is so valuable, you have to look beyond raw statistics. His impact went deeper than yards and touchdowns. He gave the offense balance. He forced defenses to respect the run. He opened up play-action opportunities and took pressure off the passing game. Week after week, Williams showed vision, power, and patience. He ran with confidence and urgency, traits that are contagious in a locker room. Teammates fed off his energy, and fans quickly embraced him as a core piece of the offense. That kind of production is exactly what teams look for in free agency. And unfortunately for Dallas, they're not the only team that noticed. The financial reality of free agency. Williams played the 2025 season on a one-year, $3 million deal. That contract now looks like a bargain. With free agency approaching, his market value has skyrocketed. According to projections, Williams could command a multi-year deal worth over $20 million. That is a significant investment, especially for a team already managing multiple large contracts across the roster. This is where tough decisions come in. The Cowboys must weigh Williams' importance against their financial flexibility. Paying him means sacrificing resources elsewhere. Letting him walk means replacing a proven playmaker. Neither option is painless. Why the New York Jets are a serious threat. Analysts believe the New York Jets are one of the strongest contenders to sign Williams. The Jets have cap space, a clear need at running back, and a roster that could benefit greatly from his skill set. A projected 3-year, $20 million deal makes sense from their perspective. For Williams, it represents security and recognition. For Dallas, it represents a looming loss. If the Cowboys are unwilling or unable to match that offer, they must be ready with a backup plan that or J.K. Dobbins, a possible replacement option. If Williams leaves, the Cowboys will need another running back capable of carrying a significant workload. One name that continues to surface in discussions is J.K. Dobbins. Dobbins' career has been defined by both promise and frustration. When healthy, he is dynamic and efficient. He runs with burst and has proven he can be productive at the NFL level. However, injuries have followed him throughout his career. Missed games and shortened seasons have prevented him from securing long-term stability. That history makes him a risky option, but also a potentially affordable one. Why Dobbins fits the Cowboys situation? From a financial standpoint, Dobbins makes sense. A one-year, $5 million deal is manageable and low risk. It allows the Cowboys to replace much of Williams' production without committing long-term money. For Dobbins, Dallas represents an opportunity. A strong season behind a solid offensive line could rebuild his value and position him for a bigger contract in the future. The Dallas Cowboys officially closed the book on their season Wednesday afternoon, holding their season-ending news conference. And, as always when Jerry Jones speaks, there was a lot to unpack. Beyond the usual end-of-year reflections, one message stood out clearly. The Cowboys believe change is coming, and this time, it could be big. Jerry Jones made it clear that the organization is ready to do what he called dramatic things this offseason. And perhaps even more surprising, he openly said that finances will not stand in the way. Jones spoke honestly about the disappointment of the season and the urgency to improve immediately. He told reporters that the incentive is there to, in his own words, bust the budget if that is what it takes to get results right now. That statement alone signals a major shift in tone for a franchise that, in recent years, has often been accused of being too cautious. According to Jones, the Cowboys are not interested in standing still. They want to be better, and they are willing to take controversial paths to make that happen. He pointed to the Micah Parsons trade as an example of the kind of bold decision the team is willing to make. That move was not made to save money or avoid competition. As Jones explained, it was done with winning in mind, even if it meant upsetting fans and inviting criticism. He emphasized that moments like this demand difficult choices, and that this offseason could bring more decisions that may not be universally popular but are designed to push the team forward. Perhaps the most eye-catching part of Jones' comments was his insistence that money will not be a limiting factor. He said the Cowboys will do everything possible to keep the team strong, competitive, and entertaining. That kind of language suggests an owner who understands that patience is wearing thin and that fans want action, not promises. It also hints that Dallas may finally be ready to abandon its reputation as a conservative spender. If the Cowboys truly follow through on this approach, the possibilities are significant. According to Cowboys Wire's KD Drummond, Dallas could open up as much as $147 million in salary cap space if they restructure contracts and make the right moves. That amount of financial flexibility would completely change how the Cowboys operate in free agency. It would allow them to re-sign key players like George Pickens and Javonte Williams, while also aggressively pursuing outside talent to upgrade the roster. Trades could also be part of this new aggressive strategy. Dallas was active on the trade market last year, with mixed results, but that experience may encourage them to explore similar opportunities again. Names like Max Crosby have already been floated by fans and analysts, though for now, it remains speculation. Still, the fact that such discussions even feel possible reflects a shift in how the Cowboys are being perceived. The most encouraging takeaway from all of this is the sense that the organization may have finally recognized its biggest flaw: doing too little for too long. For years, Dallas relied on bargain signings and internal development, hoping that small, low-risk moves would eventually pay off. That approach has not delivered championships, and it appears the Cowboys are ready to try something different. Of course, words are easier than actions. Cowboys fans have heard bold promises before, including talk of going all in, only to see minimal follow-through. That history is why skepticism remains. Still, this moment feels different. The tone is stronger, the language more direct, and the willingness to spend more openly acknowledged. Now, the pressure is on. This offseason will reveal whether Jerry Jones' comments were a genuine turning point or just another offseason storyline. If the Cowboys truly embrace aggression in free agency, the draft, and the trade market, this could be the most important offseason the franchise has had in years. Only time will tell how it all plays out, but one thing is clear: the Cowboys are promising action, and the NFL world will be watching closely to see if they finally deliver. Welcome in. And take a moment to really sit with this, because sometimes in the NFL, the most important moves aren't the ones a team makes themselves, but the ones made for them by chaos elsewhere. The Green Bay Packers' stunning wild-card collapse against the Chicago Bears didn't just end their season in embarrassing fashion. It quietly reshaped the draft landscape for another franchise entirely. And that franchise is the Dallas Cowboys. Because of that loss, the pick Dallas owns from Green Bay is now locked in at number 20 overall. And when you combine that with Dallas-owned pick at number 12, the Cowboys suddenly walk into the 2026 NFL Draft holding two top 20 selections. For a team staring down a full defensive reset in the aftermath of trading Micah Parsons, that is nothing short of massive.